Push the button when you're ready.
All right, we're live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to, I'm going to reconvene the board meeting of the Community Services Associates, Inc. of Tuesday, May 25th, 2021. The board was called into order at 9:30 this morning, and we've just finished an executive session. And I'm glad to welcome those from the community who are watching, and welcome the board and our staff back together. Our first item of business for the public part of the meeting is to ratify the approval of our board of directors meeting minutes of March 30, 2021. You've all had a chance to review those minutes. Are there any questions or concerns with the minutes? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve and ratify the approval of those minutes. Mr. Johnson, a second from Ms. Adams. All in favor, please raise your hands. Those minutes are approved. Again, I want to welcome everyone from the public to our board meeting. Before I get into the meat of the meeting, I do want to remind folks that if you have questions for the board, we are happy to answer them at the end of this meeting. We'll go directly into it after adjournment, and you can send those questions to questions@csacpines.com, and we will keep those questions, that line open through the end of adjournment. Second, I want to remind folks that the resolutions that we will be discussing this morning at the end of our reports are now available on the Sea Pines Living website. So if you want to be able to actually follow along with the actual resolutions, they are available on the website. With that, before I get into my specific remarks, on May 15th, one of our directors and a longtime resident of Sea Pines, Carrie Corbett, retired from a job that he started in 1977. Carrie started as a bag boy at the Plantation Club. I'm going to actually move this so that you can see Carrie. Oops. Hold on 1 second. Carrie is with us today in the room since he no longer is an employee of the resort. Carrie started as a bag boy in 1977 at the Plantation Club, and in 1978 became a golf professional at the original Plantation Club. Since then, Carrie has served in various capacities within the resort. For the past 28 years, Carrie has overseen sports, retail, and resort operations, as well as special projects, including golf course and clubhouse renovations, the creation of the Pete Dye Room in Harbortown Clubhouse, and the resort's involvement with the PGA Tour's annual Heritage Golf Tournament each spring. In the community, Carrie is not only a part of our golf community, but he's also in the community itself. He serves as the president of the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association, past president of the Hilton Head Island Golf Professional Association, past board member of the Carolina section of the PGA of America, and a member of the Heritage Foundation. Carrie was inducted into the Low Country Hall of Fame. To say the least, if you've been involved in any part of the resort's golf, sports, or other operations, it's largely because of the work that Carrie's done. After 42 years, he's earned a retirement, and he's definitely earned the respect and thanks of all of us in Sea Pines for the work. So Carrie, congratulations on your retirement. I'm thrilled to say he's going to stay as director, but I wanted to recognize all of your efforts and congratulate you on your retirement. So congratulations. Thank you. With that, I do want to, just a couple of things. In my May message to the community last week, I mentioned the number of major issues that I hope the board will be tackling this year, largely by beginning through the work of 3 separate task forces: a revenue task force, a parking task force, and a task force that will be considering how to spend the critical infrastructure money. I'm very pleased to note that I got a number of emails to my chairman's email address in response to that message, with a number of suggestions for these task force to take on. I appreciate the work, and I will continue to hope that the members of the community will communicate with us through my email or through the CSA general email box with ideas that they have for solving the problems. What those responses, though, highlighted was just how difficult the process will be. There are a lot of solutions that appear easy. They're hard to get to, which is why these task forces have been created, and we'll work over the next several months to come up with ideas for the board to take. We are all facing what I keep referring to as Sea Pines 2021, which I also keep referencing as being very different than the Sea Pines of 5, 10, or 20 years ago. We're at nearly full capacity virtually all the time. We have a lot more vacationers, whether they are daily pass people or people who are renting on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And when you come to vacation, just as we all did when we came to vacation or we vacation elsewhere, the likelihood of taking the time to understand every single nuance of our rules, regulations, and community standards is probably less than it is for when you're a resident, whether part-time or full-time, in the community. So this requires some new thoughts and policies and procedures to bring our visitors closer to our rules, but also to accommodate the fact that where they are not necessarily rules compliant, not intentionally rules violators, we're going to need more security and more staff to deal with those problems. Someone also noted to us that more and more of our short-term rentals are being done through VRBO and less through rental management companies. So again, you have more responsibility on our property owners to work with their renters and to work with their family guests, because it's not just renters, it's family guests who come down for a few weeks at a time as well, to bring them into, help bring them into compliance. So I want to assure the community that our task forces are working, they're working vigorously, and we're going to come up, I'm very hopeful we'll come up with solutions that we can impose this year as soon as possible, as we've got something that works for the board to consider. And I assure you that these are tough problems that we will not hesitate to face. Many of them have lingered for a long time without necessarily finding resolution. My goal for this board is to find those resolutions and start the process of finding a way to deal with Sea Pines 2021 and maintain the lifestyle that we all have come to enjoy here as a first-class community. Finally, I do want to recognize the fact that after the critical infrastructure referendum was passed, a lawsuit was filed in the federal district court to enjoin our ability to collect the money, and on the basis of that being that CSA did not have the necessary authority to call that referendum. Many of you who follow Facebook probably know that CSA filed a motion for summary judgment with the hope that we could short circuit the litigation, save everyone a lot of time and money by having the judge decide whether or not the issues warranted a lengthy litigation or could be resolved in a quick order based on summary judgment. Last week, the judge decided that he was not going to rule on that summary judgment motion, but instead was going to allow the parties to engage in full-blown discovery, which means interrogatories, written requests for documents, and probably depositions. It is possible that process will take 3 to 5 months. Could it take longer? And it could well be that at the end of that time, while CSA may again pursue a quick resolution, that won't happen and the litigation will take some time. I want to assure the community that we are confident in our position and we fully expect to win the litigation if it goes forward. We fully expect that we will take whatever actions are necessary to be able to collect the funds that we need for our critical infrastructure. There are various paths to get there, and we're going to pursue whatever it takes to get it done. I've told the Sam Bennett and the staff to assume the money will be collected and that they should be planning the process of completing the necessary repairs on a long-term basis to our critical infrastructure. That's what the vote overwhelmingly said our community wants to do, and that's what this board will continue to pursue. But there is litigation, and litigation takes time and money. And while we will participate vigorously, we will also not hesitate to do what it takes to make sure that our critical infrastructure is fully funded and the repairs are being made on a regular basis. So that's my report on the litigation. With that, those are my remarks. I'm going to turn it over to Sam Bennett, our president, for the president's remarks. Sam?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the community. I'm going to keep my remarks very brief because the directors will be reporting on the operations coming up. Just wanted to remind the community it is a very, very busy time of year and it's going to get busier. We are seeing challenges at the gate at Sea Pine Circle just because of the volumes of traffic coming through and going out. We have met with the town of Hilton Head to discuss potential solutions, and they are very amenable to working with CSA to do that. At the end of the day, it becomes a function of just how many folks are trying to get in and out of our community. And as I mentioned in previous meetings, on a busy week, we'll have 90,000 cars going through the gates. That's significant, and that capacity is not 24 hours a day. It is from 7 in the morning to 8 at night, and so it really is an infrastructure capacity. And the gate and that Greenwood corridor and the improvements that are necessary there are things that will be moving to the forefront of focus for CSA. We've done an exceptional job determining the critical infrastructure referendum and the needs of the community and taking care of the deferred maintenance. But the Greenwood corridor is moving to the surface, to the top of our focus. And I see that being where we put much of our effort as we move through the rest of the year, focusing on the gate, the corridor, and Sea Pine Circle with our partners, with the town and others. So brief reports. I'll have some additional commentary as the directors work through, but I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Sam. Let's move on then to our director's report. First in line is Amanda Sutcliffe-Jones for communications. Amanda, welcome.
Good morning, Larry. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Get my camera set up. Give me just a quick second.
Yes, count the rest so that it segues right.
Okay. So good morning again, board, and thank you, Larry and Sam. I will keep my comments brief. Two updates to pass along. The Communications Committee met in May. Our next meeting is on June 15th. I do want to pass along the good news that we are working to get meeting minutes posted in a much more timely manner. Our meeting minutes are posted on our website at seapinesliving.com/property owners. So working expeditiously to get those posted for us once they are approved via email, and then we're ratifying those at the following meeting. As Larry noted as well, we have also started posting our board resolutions along with the agenda on our website. That is located on our website at seapinesliving.com/events. So you can actually go to that board meeting, see those resolutions as well as the agenda. Last item to note is our board of director elections is upcoming. Our information is posted on our website as well. Important date to note is August 1st, 2021 is our due date for board of director election applications. Those who are interested in being nominated by petition have until October 1st. Board election ballots will be sent to owners on November 1st, and they're due back by December 1st. And certainly if the CSA Communications Department can be of any assistance, feel free to reach out to us. You can email us at info@csacpines.com, or you can always call the front office. That's my update, Larry.
Thank you, Amanda. Any questions from the board for Amanda? Okay, seeing none, Victoria, I'm going to move you down to the end so we can join you with the finance report. So I'm going to move directly then to Russell Fredericks, maintenance, enhancement, and major projects.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Sam. Good morning to everyone, and hope everyone's safe and healthy. And just one note before I begin my remarks, I just want to again congratulate Carrie Corbett on his career in Sea Pines. It's really certainly very commendable. And Carrie, thank you so much for bringing our community along. A couple of remarks on our projects. North Sea Pines Drive roadway construction from phase 1 from Lighthouse Road to Red Cardinal was completed on time and on budget. We're looking forward and planning the next phases of the project from Red Cardinal Road to the Ocean Gate. Our ditch cleaning of our master stormwater system is in progress. We're currently working in proximity to the Greenwood Forest, close to Battery Road, and we're removing hundreds and hundreds of yards of organic sediment that's accumulated through many, many years in those ditches. I'm pleased to report that the construction and repair of beach boardwalks number 18 and 35A have been completed earlier this season, and they are open for use. We continue to work hand in hand with the town of Hilton Head on stormwater repairs throughout the community, and currently working closely with the town on the Lawton Canal Pump Station, which will be fully operational by the beginning of June in preparation for our upcoming hurricane season ahead. Finally, pleased to report the biannual flower changeout was completed throughout the community. And again, we made those flowers available for property owners and look forward to the next changeout. That concludes my report this morning, and pleased to take any questions if anyone has any.
Russell, go ahead and explain the building that is being built by Lawton Canal. I know what it's going to be used for, but a lot of people are asking, what is that building going to be housing?
Thank you for the question, Carrie. And the building on the far side of the Heritage Farm houses all the pump station components, the electronics. There's a backup generator in the building. The building that was there was built in the late 1980s. The building does bring us up to standards today with hurricane preparation and flood stage as well within the community. So that building was designed to survive those events. And from there, the electronic controls operate 3 pumps that are located within the intake chambers at Lawton Canal. Each pump is capable of pumping 28,000 gallons a minute of stormwater out into the Calabogie Sound during storm events. And whether that be a hurricane or a significant rain event that we may have, the station was in long need of a repair. Again, built in the 1980s, and we're certainly pleased to see this project come to a conclusion. Final aspects will include some landscaping around that building. So, hope that answers your question.
Perfect. Thank you.
If I could add to that, just for the board and the community, Russell and his team have done a magnificent job of working with the town to make sure this project stays on time and on schedule. This is one of the most critical pieces of infrastructure within the Sea Pines community for dealing with storm water issues and major events. And I want to commend Russell and his team, Doug and Jared, for all their work on this. And I appreciate the efforts the town and their contractor have made on this. It will be ready for storm season, and it is I can't emphasize enough how important this project is to Sea Pines and our community for our storm safety.
David Ellis, you have a question?
Is that a windmill attached to it?
Thank you for the question, David. That windmill was part of the Heritage Farm. I believe it was, again, installed many, many years ago in the 80s. Carrie, you could expand on that, but I think it was part of that overall farm kind of appeal out there. That was kind of when the Heritage Farm was established is when that windmill was installed, and that's why it's there.
It's right now just a little landmark. It doesn't really support anything. I think it did tie to some water in the early days, but it's just a landmark now.
Jim Caskey?
Yeah, Russell, thanks for the report. When I do my walks and bike rides or drive around and I see the dredging that's going on, number one, I give thanks that we had 88% of our residents say, "Whoa, we got a problem here." But it's amazing how much is coming out of those ditches. Did you expect all of that? And is everyone going to be as bad as the ones they've started to dredge out? I mean, it's the piles of debris and muck it's just alarming that that's the condition of our infrastructure.
Good morning, Jim, and thank you for the question. Greatly appreciated. And to answer your question is yes, we did some field reconnaissance in advance with our engineer and the town to kind of get a sense of what would be coming out of those ditches. More than likely, most of them were cleaned out some 30 or 40 years ago, maybe even more than that. So you can imagine all the leaf litter, branches, organic debris that made their way in there, clogging these ditches throughout the community. We have several miles of ditch throughout Sea Pines. We're working on a portion of that now, approximately 3 plus or minus miles. But these ditches are critical as part of the stormwater infrastructure system within the community. As we know, many of these areas under roads are piped with drainage pipe or underneath our roadways, but a large portion of the property also is these surface ditches that convey water from lagoon to lagoon or to other outfalls. which are equally important to those stormwater pipes that we're all familiar with that are failing throughout the community. So again, we did expect that amount of debris, and we are using a lot of that sediment to kind of grade off and fill some other areas within CSA open space. So we're recycling that organic matter within the community.
Russell, I'd be interested in how many cubic yards you're moving.
Not
Not right now, but in general. I think it'd be interesting to know.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Rich. And approximately 2,000 to 3,000 cubic yards of material is what we're estimating is coming out of these ditches. And those were some early on calculations that we had.
Thank you, Russell. Any other questions? Russell, thank you very much. With that, I'll move on to David Henderson and Operations and Special Projects. David, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a couple quick operational updates. The community center resumed operations yesterday, Monday, May 24th. And going forward, we'll operate as we did pre-COVID, Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. I'm also pleased to announce that the CSA Administration Building will be opening tomorrow, Wednesday, May 26th. Our hours will remain Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Over the past year plus, many owners and service providers were able to get their service needs fulfilled online, whether it be a decal, an ID card to update contact information. And many of those found the process to be more convenient and more efficient. And so while we are going to open our doors tomorrow here at the administration building, we do encourage those that found the online process to be more convenient to continue doing so. That concludes my report, Mr. Chair. I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
What I was saying is certainly as bad as the pandemic was in impacting our lives generally and the way it affected so many folks with illness and unfortunate deaths, there were a few positives that came out of it for CSA's operations. One is, as David's mentioned, the fact that we developed a fairly efficient online approach to many of the needs of our community. And I'm glad to hear we will continue to make those things available, thereby making it more convenient, particularly for folks out of town and even those who are in town, and puts less stress on a staff that, as we know, we can use more of. And then obviously the ability to use our Zoom technology to make our meetings available, not just to those who happen to be in town, but to the entire community of 5,800 property owners. When we had well over 200 people attending our meetings, our annual meeting, and when we see a number of folks watching our meetings live and also later. So the Zoom approach has worked well. We're going to try and find a way to maintain that Zoom approach, but also increase our in-person meeting capability over the next several months. But I do think at the very least, COVID did provide some benefits for us. If there's no other questions for David or Sam?
I just want to add, I appreciate David's efforts over the last 14 months. This was certainly, being the COVID czar for CFON CSA, was certainly above and beyond David's normal responsibilities. And he did a wonderful job with it and without complaint. David, we appreciate your leadership in that area very, very much.
I want to second that for sure. Okay, with no other questions for David, we will move on to Safety, Security, and Transportation, Toby McSwain. Welcome, Toby.
Good morning. For this month, so far we've responded to roughly about 2,500 calls for service as of yesterday. We are on track for another 3,000 plus calls for service for the month. This month, our highest priority calls were on May 20th, just here a couple of days ago. We had 9 car break-ins again in the club course area. If you recall, back in January, we had 16 cars that were broken into in the club course area. And I say broken into, these vehicles were unlocked, as well as this last series of 9 cars all the vehicles were left unlocked. This last occurrence, we believe the subjects crawled over the fence over in the Publix parking lot area. The prior event in January, we think they came through the Harris Teeter parking lot adjacent to the Greenwood gate. We have since installed cameras along the Greenwood gate as you come in, and we're hoping here in the next several weeks they'll be operational. So at least in those late night, evening times when visibility from the gate is not that good, these cameras will have a sensor on them and pick up and notify our dispatch that someone has breached the cameras. But as always, we are still encouraging everyone, you got to lock your doors. This last series of car break-ins were, we had some firearms that were stolen in this last series. So you've got to lock your cars up. We did earlier in this past week, we had a driving under the influence that occurred. We had several calls that came in asking why the back gate, the Ocean Gate, was backed up. We had an individual that was under the influence, came in the outbound lanes at the Ocean Gate, and that subject was subsequently arrested by Beaufort County. The other remaining calls for service are domestic animal calls, which you would expect with a number of guests that we have here now, are up. However, our motor vehicle crashes, bicycle crashes, improper parking, and our noise complaints are down compared to last month. But we also have a holiday weekend approaching, so I'm sure we'll be right back where we were last month. So the past 7 days, since last Wednesday until this morning, we've had 38,400 vehicles come through the Greenwood Gate, 16,600 vehicles through the Ocean Gate. Last week, we had 345 short-term rental passes were sold at the gate. We had 85 weekly rental vouchers that were redeemed, and the Welcome Center issued 2,800 short-term rental passes to guests that are going to be on property this week. Currently, our Ocean Gate bicycle gate is broken. We're hoping to have it repaired this week. Last Thursday, we have added an attendant that is working that gate to help check people that are coming in through that gate. And we're averaging roughly about 200 bikes a day coming through. She's telling me that she's also turning around anywhere from 90 to 100 on the average a day that have no access to C-fines at all. The trolley system is currently up and running with the exception of a few modifications on our red line. We are short of drivers right now. We probably are not going to have a full complement of drivers until the second week of June, once our school district is released are out for the season, because 7 of those drivers are currently driving school buses throughout the county. Tower Beach is open, and just to reiterate, you need a property owner ID card or property owner decal to get into Tower Beach. You cannot give your ID card to someone to gain access to Tower Beach, and guest cars are not permitted. So it's not property owner plus one with someone with your guest following behind you in a separate vehicle. It's strictly property owners' cars only. And that's all I have for an update.
Thank you, Toby. Any questions for Toby?
Toby, you wanted to comment, since you have probably covered most of my report, so go ahead and finish with the CSA 360 software. Yes,
we this past Friday, we received our first update from CSA 360. With staff is currently working on a beta test of what the initial rollout has been. There's going to be some modifications made to it, but the good thing that has really come out of this right now is that CSA 360 is talking to NetSuite, which was one of the biggest hurdles that we had to overcome, is to making sure that this software would talk to our main database, which is NetSuite, and that is occurring. So right now, staff over the next month is going to be testing this program, making some changes before we move into the next phase. So it's going along quite well. And functionality doesn't look like it will begin until year end, correct? Say that again, Carrie?
When it becomes live, it's not going to be until around year end.
That's correct. Yeah, we may have the opportunity to go live, but we would not be giving that software to any short-term rental companies until the season is over.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Toby? Go ahead, David Ellis.
Unmute.
Unmute, David.
The past couple of weeks, I've noticed a couple of raccoons walking around in the yard during the daytime. Are you experiencing any that anywhere else?
Yes. Yes, the wildlife is still quite busy in here with our alligators, but we have responded here over the last month to what we think are a number of rabid raccoons cases that we've had. So we are seeing an uptick in our raccoon removal process.
Well, I was worried because my experience is when I see them walking during the day, they're rabid normally.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are responding to quite a few calls. The snakes are out and about as well, especially Heritage Road. We have just seems to be an influx of copperheads in that area. I don't think there's been any other location other than Heritage Road that we've had so many reports of copperheads. We've had kids and adults, property owners bitten in that area. So wildlife is quite busy right now.
David, I will mention that when it comes to raccoons, we noticed a raccoon closer to dusk, but it was still daylight, walking on our deck. And we ended up finding out that it was a mother raccoon who had decided to nest a group of babies underneath our house. And so after a week of trying to trap it, they were actually removed. So you may find some of those raccoons are in fact females looking for food as opposed to just rabid, because apparently they do come out during the day if that's what they need. But I'm not a wildlife expert. I will only tell you when they're underneath your house, you hear them. Scott?
Yeah, Larry, I just wanted to add, there has been a significant number of cases of rabies from Sun City all the way down through the island, and it might behoove us to give some people some pointers about not messing with those raccoons. Don't touch them, don't pick them up, don't, et cetera, because that is extremely, obviously you don't want to have to take those shots, but a lot of tourists around and all. I just think as many reports and verifications of rabid, not only raccoons, but coyotes and so forth that are going on, we might ought to put something in your, weekly letter or monthly letter. I know you don't want to, we don't want to do that, but we don't want somebody trying to think a rabid raccoon is cute and it bites one of their kids or something. So anyway, enough said.
Appreciate that, Scott. It does remind us again that we can put all we want in our newsletters, but those go to the property owners, and it's the property owner's responsibility, particularly those that are renting, to remind their renters of the kinds of problems that you've identified. It's sad to hear that we're having people bitten by copperheads or raccoons out there that are rabid or other wildlife. So I do, for those who are listening, and we will put it out again, we can communicate as much as we can with property owners and through our signage with visitors, but at the end of the day, it's up to property owners to know what's going on and to do what they can to have their renters aware of these problems. With that, any other questions for Toby? I think we've all seen the increase in the number of people coming through the gates, and it just behooves us again. When we have these, the more people we have, the more likely we're going to have security issues. And I think it's fair to remind everyone that we remain understaffed because of hiring and understaffed because of needs. And that's one of the things we're going to be working on this year, to find the revenue that we can afford to pay the top quality dollar that we need to bring in the best security and maximum and necessary security force we need for Sea Pines 2021. With that, I'll turn to Victoria Shanahan for the finance and administration report, and then you can move into financial update, please.
Okay, thank you, Larry. For finance, it's interesting, as of the end of March, there was a little over $565,000 worth of assessments that hadn't been paid. And my staff, as of April 1st, cut off the property owner's ability to call in a pass for their friends and their guests. Today, we're down to $180,000. So that really does get their attention, and it does bring out those unpaid invoices. As Larry mentioned, we are down and still have some open positions. In fact, when I was writing notes for this, I had 5 open positions, 3 in security and 2 in maintenance. And as of an hour ago, now we have 4 in security that are open. So we're really struggling to not only find people, but find good people. I'm currently this summer putting out a request for proposal for our insurance broker to not only, sell us insurance, but also guide us as to, do we have the proper limits? Do we have enough insurance? Do we not have enough insurance? So we're working on that this summer. And finally, our staff is working on, we're getting a new payroll software. So that's being implemented right now and they're running parallel. So I've really been putting quite a burden on my staff this summer, which is usually a quiet time for us.
Before we move into the financial update, is there any questions for Victoria on her report about the finance operations administration? I hope everyone heard the importance of finding good staff, filling the positions, and those are just the positions that were budgeted this year. We know we need more. So I'll keep that message in front of everyone for as long as I can until we fix the problem with additional revenue. Moving on then to financial update, Victoria and David.
Victoria, go ahead with the financial statements for.
No, you could go ahead and do this.
Okay, the finance committee, and I might as well meld this in with the finance committee report. The finance committee did in fact review the March 31 financial statements. They're in your packet. I can tell you that if you look at our current assets less current liabilities as of March 31, we're doing well compared to the same period in the prior year. Obviously, when you look at those numbers, you must understand that we recognize 100% of the residential assessments and commercial assessments, even though those monies are intended to cover our operating expenses throughout the entire calendar year. Consequently, our assets versus liabilities looks great in the earlier part of the years because we haven't spent the amount of money that we will need to spend throughout the remainder of the calendar year. From an income statement standpoint, you will notice that, well, let me go back one more thing. You will notice that in our designated fund balances, we've added two. One is the beach club shuttle. Since we are spending money and since we are collecting money from short-term renters, but also spending that kind of funds in order to maintain the lot and the services of the trolley for the beach shuttle, we're now keeping track of both the revenue and expenditure side and classifying that for your information. The other one is that we have started the fund for the infrastructure, and we're handling that so that we can keep track of the money that's being spent currently, even though we're not going to be receiving the funds until next year. But that was all part of the plan and what we put forward to the community, that we would be spending money on North Sea Pines Drive as well as the ditch cleanout in this year, expecting funds from the referendum from next year. From a P&L standpoint, you'll notice that we are positive variance for gate pass fees and short-term rental, which obviously Toby indicated the amount of traffic coming through. And I can tell you that with respect to the daily gate passes that have been issued through April, we are 7.5% ahead of the same period of time in 2019. Which is a more comparable period than 2020 due to the COVID effects in late March and April of 2020. So we're up significantly in those areas. The largest issue we have from a negative standpoint is the expenditures of general and administrative operating expenses. Basically, there are three items that we will be proposing a budget amendment for. And the three basic items are our insurance premiums increased substantially this year, primarily in the area of directors and officers liability insurance. And I'll talk about that in a second, but as well as our excess liability coverages. The insurance markets are very, very difficult this past year. And that is the reason why Victoria has mentioned the fact that we are seeking out other advisors and other brokers who may help us do a better job of reducing our costs, but also increasing our understanding of our potential exposures and risks and how we should manage that from purchase of outside insurance versus self-insurance. The other is our litigation cost, which is substantially higher, primarily due to the jinx litigation on the referendum. That is money that is not being covered by insurance because our insurance has a much, much higher retention. And unfortunately, we're spending money rather than fixing the infrastructure, we're spending it on legal costs. And then lastly, we have not an increase in the property tax, but the fact is that last year the property taxes were deferred until this year in the county, and consequently we basically have a double up of the expenditures that we're going to incur this year versus last year. So those are the three items, and I'm going to let Victoria handle the request for the budget amendment.
Well, you didn't leave me very much to say. You pretty much covered the whole thing. So the Finance Committee met last week, and they are recommending to the board that we pass an additional budget amendment for a total of
436,233.
436,233, which is made up of 124,524 of that insurance that Mr. Borghese mentioned, 229,912 in the property taxes, and 81,797 for legal expenses.
Okay, well, there are two board approval, two resolutions for the board to approve. 9B is approval of, 9A is approval of the financial statements year to date, March 31, 2021.
It's the acceptance of those financial statements. I'd like to get rid of we're not approving them.
Okay, it's acceptance of it. The amendment will be then the resolution is for acceptance. Go ahead, David, read.
I'll do it. Resolved, and I will move that the Community Service Associates Board of Directors accepts the financial statements year-to-date March 31, 2021 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Pardue. Are there any questions for Mr. Borghese or Ms. Shanahan on the financials? Mr. Johnson.
What are we estimating? Or what have we spent on this Jinx lawsuit to date? And what are we estimating if this thing goes into next year, our cost to defend this lawsuit is going to be?
David, I'm sorry, Bill, I think in terms of those expenses, I don't know that we've yet added them up. They are, some part of it will be covered by insurance, part of it is under the deductible. And in terms of estimates, that's virtually impossible to determine. One part will be based on what the discovery ends up being. But again, given I think it's fair to say it's not an insignificant amount of money by any stretch of the imagination. It could easily run into hundreds of thousands of dollars. And certainly it's well over tens of thousands of dollars already. But in terms of specifics, it is, we have a community and a nation in which people have the right to sue. They have the right to have their grievances heard by a court, and we have the right to defend what we think we did, and that's where we are. And so we will defend it. If obviously, as I noted earlier, that we had hoped through summary judgment to shorten the time frame and the expenses for all sides. And at some point in time, we'll continue to look at ways to minimize the expenses. But we will pursue the case as long as we are certain that we are right, as we do now believe we are.
Caskey.
Mr. Caskey?
Yeah, looking at the financials, it's pretty alarming when Victoria describes the vacancies. And good news there is you get positive credit on your income statement because you're not spending as much as you think. And then you have the insurance. I just want to make sure as we communicate our financial condition, some could look at this financial statement and say, oh, well, they're making, money, the Y assessments and things like that. But when you really look at it, if we're able to fill these positions and against the insurance, we'd have a significant operating challenge, which is to your point, Larry, that we need to find new ways to generate revenues because we've got this insurance problem that's the nation has, and we've got this shortage of staff, which creates vacancy credits. And I think that's a fast burning fuse for us financially.
Thank you, Jim. Any other comments or questions for David on the financial? Then I'll move the question. All in favor of resolution 9A, raise your hands.
Aye.
A pass. Thank you. We now have resolution 9B, which is approval of the amendment to the budget for 2021. David, you want to go ahead and read that?
I move that the Community Service Associate Board of Directors, on the recommendation of the Finance Committee, approves the amendment to the budget of $436,233 in the general administration operating expense category.
Any second?
Second.
Thank you, Rich. Any questions for our finance group on this budget amendment? I think it's been well spelled out. I will tell you, having sat in on the finance committee, they looked at this at great length and understood the needs. And as I think has been indicated, this is the shortfall we know about. It doesn't necessarily meet our absolute needs in the administration, but we'll have to deal with that with more revenue. And seeing no questions, I'll call the question. All in favor of resolution 9B, raise your hands. Any opposition? Seeing none, that passes. That's the end of our financial update. Thank you, Ms. Shanahan and Mr. Borghese. Before we move on to committee reports, I want to remind those who are watching that we are still taking questions for the board. And if you have questions for our senior directors, they'll also remain on the Zoom. If there's specific questions to any of our senior staff, you can send them in. The questions will be accepted through adjournment. And so if you have questions, please feel free to send them to questions@csacpines.com. With that, I will move on to our committee reports. Before I do, I just want to remind the board that we do have in our packet the ARB monthly status report, which includes 9 single-family applications. This is January through April 2021. So for the first half of the year, we had 9 single-family residential applications. We had 42 major alterations and 298 minor operations, 16 pools, 12 changes for commercial, and 1 new single-family rebuild, and 4 demolition. So we still are continuing to see a significant amount of money being spent on construction in Sea Pines. And again, I think as you're driving around our neighborhoods, that should be obvious by the number of people we have in our building. Sadly, some of the buildings seem to be slowing down, but I assume that's just a matter of lack of resources in a community that is being built out as fast as we are having it. So thank you for that. I'll move now to Mr. Ellis and communications.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, Amanda has really presented everything that I would have said or wanted to say. So I will have nothing else to add to her report.
Thank you, David. Any questions for Mr. Ellis on communications? Seeing none, I'll move on to Mr. Borghese. Do you have anything to add to the finance?
It's already been covered.
Thank you. I'll move then to gate entry and Mr. Corbett. Did you have anything to add already to what's been said?
No, most of everything that is in my report, Toby commented on, as did Victoria. I will say that based on comments at our last CSA board meeting regarding motorcycles, during our meeting, I did provide a history of actions that took place within the meetings held in 2018 at the committee and board level concerning motorcycle use within Sea Pines. And so motorcycles use remain prohibited within Sea Pines. I just wanted to go on record to say that and make sure that everybody knows that where we stand on that. Our president, Mr. Bennett, provided an update regarding the Greenwood Corridor project from Sea Pines Circle to Sea Pines Gate on Greenwood Drive. And Sam has met with Mark Orlando, the town manager. And so there's dialogue and conversation ongoing that does look positive. And Mr. Marshman, Chairman Marshman provided an update regarding the newly formed Revenue Task Force. So no further comments, and thank you.
Any questions for Carrie Corbett on gate entry? Seeing none, I'm Jim Caskey. I'm going to drop you to the end because I know we have a number of resolutions coming out of your committee. So I'll move on to land use management. Mr. Minor.
Land use management has several resolutions under new business. Do you want to do those right now, or do you want to wait till new business?
Let's do those right now because they're a little short.
Okay, good. We have a charter approval. We have one addition to the membership of land use membership in Ed Warner. And then we have the adoption of the rules and regulations, both for LUM and for safety and security. Both of those have been reviewed extensively by workshops within CSA. And I would move that we adopt those rules and regulations.
Thank you, Charlie. Okay, we have under new business, we have approval of the Land Use Management Committee Charter. I presume it's been, you all have reviewed it. Do you have any questions on the charter for Mr. Minor? Seeing none, I'll move for the second of that motion. Mr. Barth, with no further discussion, all in favor of adopting the committee charter, raise your hands. Thank you. The second is the committee membership, adding Mr. Warner to the committee. If there's no questions, I'll move for adoption of that change to the committee charter. All in favor? Raise your hands, please. Thank you. And the next is the amendment of the Sea Pines Land Use Management Rules and Regulations for 2021. I know we adopted the rules a couple last meeting. I think there's a minor change here. Mr. Bennett, do you want to explain what it is?
Yes, sir. As we discussed at the last board meeting, this is where we are adding back the language that was inadvertently omitted that gives the land use monitor the ability to work with the ARB to require enforcement.
Okay, so the only adoption is we're amending what we had adopted last time to add ARB enforcement to the land use monitor. Is there a second to the approval of that resolution? I see Mr. Thompson. Any questions about this change in the rules, Mr. Caskey?
Just a question. We put these all out for community review as well. So
Yes,
was there any we learned from the community input, or was there any?
Today, Jim, there is other than one member of the LUM, there has been no additional community input, and the rules are still on the website for review by the community.
I think it's a positive that the community's had the opportunity and recognizes the benefit of these new rules. They will go into effect on July 1. And I think our hope is that they've been out there long enough for everyone to understand what they are. And as I've said a number of times, it is on the community to understand these rules and to make their visitors and guests, whether they are short-term renters, family guests, or simply others, aware of these rules. As we've said a number of times, and as I've told those who have asked me in my chairman's email, to the extent that a party is renting their property and their renters are violating these rules, the renter will be notified of the violation, but so will the property owner. And to the extent that the property owner fails to take action against those renters and/or is regularly renting to people who violate our rules, we will impose the fines and forfeitures on the property owner. And so I urge property owners, particularly those through VRBO and others, to make sure that their renters, their short-term renters and long-term renters, are fully aware of our rules and are compliant with them. Next is the adoption of the Sea Pines Safety and Security Rules and Regulations. Sam, do you want to explain why we're adopting those today?
I do. Just as a reminder to the board, previously the rules and regulations associated with land use, safety and security, they were all intermingled in various sets of rules. And what's been done with land use is land use rules have been set out and set as sort of their own bucket of rules now to make things simpler and easier to deal with from a land use monitor's perspective. What we're doing here is we're just restating the Sea Pines safety and security rules that aren't encompassed by land use management rules There's nothing new in these rules for safety and security. This is just a restatement of the existing rules minus the work that was done under the Land Use Management Committee to put the new land use management rules together.
So they're consistent.
Yes, correct. Yes, sir, Mr. Minor. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Sam or Charlie on the adoption of these rules? Seeing none, I'll take a second to the motion 12D, approval of the CPINES CSA Safety and Security Rules and Regulations. Mr. Johnson, all in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? Seeing none, that is adopted. Thank you, Mr. Minor, for that report and for the fine work of your committee in getting these rules drafted and approved. Next, I'll move to Mr. Barth, the maintenance.
I have one other additional item under land use. That is that I believe, Mr. Chairman, you gave us the responsibility for coming up with a leaf blower recommendation. So we are working on that. And as most people are aware, ASPO adopted a policy which we will review and refer back to CSA for our general approval.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm glad you remembered that CSA is taking this up as an action item. The land use group is looking at them as it is certainly within their scope of where the rules might apply. And I know this is a matter that is of great interest to the community. I'm sure there will be some on both sides of the issue, but I think it's important that we find a proposal that we can put out and see where it stands. So thank you for taking on that responsibility.
Okay.
Anything else, Charlie?
Nope.
Okay. Any questions on that issue for Mr. Minor? Seeing none now, I will move to you, Mr. Barth, maintenance, enhancement, and major projects.
Thank you, Larry. Russell did, as he always does, an excellent job summarizing exactly what they're working on, projects in the community. The only thing I would add is Sam mentioned this early about forming a task force, and Russell and I and a couple board members or a couple committee members on the MEMP committee will be working with the finance committee, to basically track finance and projects related to the infrastructure referendum. So we look forward to working with you, Sam, and the rest of the task force. Thanks.
Any questions for Mr. Barth on MEMP? Thank you, Barry. Thank you for your report. I'll move on to Mr. Johnson, safety, security, and transportation.
Sorry about that. Toby did a great job also of covering everything. We met on May 5th. A couple other things that I would highlight is that we've discussed in pretty great detail e-bikes, and just a reminder to the community that as of right now, electric bikes are not allowed in CPINES. And they're, with the amount of activity we have going on, they seem to be a lot of e-bikes running around. One other thing I'd like to acknowledge Steve Alfred. He had to resign from our committee due to a conflict that he had on a committee that meets at the same time with the town of Hilton Head. But I want to thank Steve publicly for his years of commitment to this committee and task force under it that he served on. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I'll add Mr. Alfred's done a great job for us, particularly in the area of bike safety. But I think his role on the town planning will also be of great benefit, having someone from CPINES directly involved in that process. Any questions for Mr. Johnson on safety and security? Seeing none, I will move on to the CPINES Forest Preserve Advisory Board. Charlie?
Unmute, Charlie.
Part of the Zoom process that we're all still getting used to is muting and unmuting.
Yeah. I'd like to acknowledge again, I think we already covered it in the last meeting, the revenue changes within the Forest Preserve. We had a major donor locally from whom we have received the first deposit. We have a donation from ARB and the resort. I would like to thank the resort once again for adopting the $2 room night donation by guests towards the Forest Preserve. That should, we're still estimating what that will amount to, but we expect it to be over $100,000 per year. We are organizing the committee within the Forest Preserve to work on a variety of tasks, one of which is to expand that fee to other rental agents. We're also trying to put together a general overview of all the things that we want to do. John Parsons is heading that up. He'll work with Rich Spear on that to put together and come forward probably by the next meeting with a general overview of what we see as the scope of the Forest Preserve and its funding.
Thank you, Charlie. Any questions for Charlie? That his committee is again organized and active, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of work that coming out of that committee that can be very valuable in improving the experience in the Forest Preserve. And I again want to thank the resort for starting the program it has with a $2 a day fee on its guests. I hope we will be able to encourage other renters, those who rent their property, to do the same as a way of increasing the opportunity. I also want to recognize the Salty Dog for the amount of it contributes through its various efforts at fundraising. So we have a good process going, and now we have an active advisory board, and I think that will greatly enhance the opportunity to improve the experience that we all get, including our visitors, in what is clearly a major asset of CSA in the Forest Preserve, or the community sea pines in the Forest Preserve. Thank you, Charlie. Any questions for Mr. Minor on that? Seeing none, I'll move on to short-term rental and Mr. Ellis.
Well, it's already been discussed in various aspects of this meeting, and what I think is pretty obvious to a lot of people based on the emails I know I get and what I see. The increased number of short-term rentals is presenting a tremendous challenge to our community. And the number of people, the increase at the gate, getting in and out, people parking all over the place, bicycles stacked all over the place, basically with neighbors complaining, calling security, et cetera. The noises that gets created, and particularly you've got pools at these places, and the kids or people are out there, you know, at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and these pools, our properties are close to each other, so the neighbors get the noise. And so it's creating a number of issues and tensions within different parts of the aspects of the community. And somehow we're going to have to deal with it, because we've in effect now have a number of mini hotels with, you know, instead of what would be contemplated as single family housing use normally, but it's what we're going to have to deal with. So we have to come up with some way to address these issues. And, you know, starting to look at it, but it's put a tremendous cost in CSA, the increased use of the infrastructure, the increased need of personnel year round instead of just mainly during the summer season as it has been in the past. So it's a good thing in one sense, and it's causing challenges on the other sense, and we just have to find a way to deal with it and how we're going to handle it. And so we are involved in it, not only through looking at it through the short-term rental committee. I think it's an overall issue for the CSA board, and something that we need to give some concerted thought to. So I recognize that for all of you who have said that the renters need to obey the rules, know that they're getting a copy of all of our rules and regulations. We can't make them read it. We can't just sit there with them and go over it and say, you can't do this, you can't do that. There's just not, you know, that's just not available. And so they get all of this, they read it, they know what they're supposed to do. Whether they read it or not, we don't know. Even if they read it, they may not agree with it. They're only going to be here a week, so maybe they just try to get away with what they can. We don't know, but it is causing a lot of problems. And so we are working on it. We realize it's a big issues, and I just want everybody to know that, you know, it's not something that's going unnoticed, but it is a difficult thing to deal with because you do have those people who are in business investing and renting their properties, and they're looking to make that profit. And then you have the homeowners and other people who live there permanently, and that becomes an interaction that is creates some tensions, so to say. So know that we're trying to do what we can, and it's going to be a difficult process to try to see how we end up being able to relieve some of the tensions and meet some of these challenges. I'll take any questions if anybody has any.
Any questions for Mr. Ellis on this issue, on the committee? Seeing none, thank you, David, for that report. And I think we all agree that this is something that this board will be working on for the next 6 or 7 months, trying to find the balance, the appropriate balance, and also find the necessary staff to meet the balance. Okay, I will then move on to strategic planning. Mr. Pardue.
Yes, thank you, Larry. There's really nothing new to report on strategic planning. Our next meeting is June 17th. We just continue to try to prioritize some issues on the last strategic plan that the board adopted in 2018 and 2019. The long-term planning obviously has to take into account how much long-term funding we've got. And so we're somewhat at a standstill now because not knowing how we're going to get money for some of the things that the committee and maybe the board want to do, but we just continue to review that and analyze it and try to come to terms with making our community the best we can in light of what we have to the finances that we have to spend. So happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Pardue? Thank you, Dave. I know long-term planning and strategic planning is an important matter, particularly in a community that is evolving. So I appreciate the work that your committee is doing. Before I turn to Mr. Caskey, I do want to recognize the work of the governance committee. Several years ago, our vice chair, Michael Tucker, made improving governance an important element of the board's work. And that committee, which we've had various chairs through, and Jim Caskey is chair for 2 years, has worked diligently to improve governance. You can never assume that what you're doing, the way you've done it for the long time, is perfect. And I think the committee is working to, without changing the rules, improve the way our process, so that our community continues to have the kind of faith that we're doing it right, as they've consistently demonstrated through elections and referenda. So with that, I'll turn to Mr. Caskey for the 3 elements that you've moved forward. Jim?
Great, thank you, Larry. And I do want to thank the committee. It's great. I think we're up to 14 homeowners who come together on a volunteer basis and try to say, how can we take what we have and make it better? We do have 3 actions that are coming forward. The first is that we've recognized the need to strengthen our committee processes. So there's, within your packet, and tied to resolution 12F, is a committee guideline. And what we try to do is just basically a standard operating procedure around committee function, how they come together, how they're made up, the mix, how they establish an agenda, how do they do their minutes and all of that, and what their charter involves. So it's a framework that pulls together pieces out of the bylaws, out of good governance, and really gives us a very straightforward approach to standard operating procedure. And it's a very important change, I believe, for the organization, because what it calls for in the guidelines is that at the beginning of the year of the committee cycle, the committee chair is to meet with the chair of the board and the president of CSA and establish what are the 4 priorities, the 4 agenda items that are going to be tackled. And the idea here is that we've got to get the various topics corralled and organized so that management is clearly on top of all the issues, and that governance has set the priorities from a top down as well as allowing input from the bottom up. So that's a big change for us, that we just don't start the year and a committee chair establish what their agenda is. That is done now in concert with a formal process, the management of CSA and the board. So I'd be looking forward to recommend that resolution. Larry, do you want to take I think maybe better to take them separate. So
Yeah, are there any questions on the committee guidelines? Dave Borghese?
Yeah, I really went through this and I have no substantial change to it, but there are some wording that could really be clarified. One is under the committee functions, finance, we don't approve financial statements. Would like to actually just eliminate that. With respect to committee membership, I think there's, I think in the first page, you probably, it is well spoken out, but in the verbiage that we have here, it's unclear whether or not when at least 2 CSA board members are appointed by CSA chair and serve ex officio on the committee, who's serving ex officio, the 2 members or the board chair? And I think it's the board chair, but I think that can be clarified better in the latter part of that section when it just says that each member, the chair of the board and CSA president shall serve as additional members of all committees. They serve in an ex officio capacity. So I think we should just clean up some of the verbiage so that it's a little clearer and precise. And again, we say maximum of 6 years and 6 consecutive years because a committee member can then go back after 1 year of being off of the committee and go back on. And I think the last thing that's really important is a statement that the committees are advisory to the board and cannot represent or act on behalf of the CSA board without the specific approval of the board itself. I think that's one of the most important things.
Jim, what I'd like to do, if you're acceptable, would be for the board to adopt the proposal subject to edits, not non-substantive edits that you and David would work out.
Great.
I'm happy with, and I'd be happy with that too.
Other members of the board, any questions in that or any concerns about that? Okay, then I'll look for a second for the approval amendment. I'm sorry, resolution number, this would be resolution 12G.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, 12G is adopted subject to editorial privilege between Mr. Borghese and Mr. Caskey. Jim, you want to move on to number?
Yeah, second one, and to David's point, very, very astutely, that the committees are advisory to the board and that they do, following this new guideline, will establish priorities and work with through the board process. But one of the things that we felt we needed to strengthen our discipline around, and that is confidentiality. That as committees discuss topics, they need to stay at the committee table. And that if there's some idea that's tossed out or some comment by a member, it's not appropriate for a member to take that and go onto social media with it or go and start, talking about it out of context of what the committee is doing. So we came up with 2 things. We worked on 2 things. One is a confidentiality pledge that a member who's joining a committee, and we're all neighbors, we're all property owners, would come on and say, yeah, I agree that there is discourse at the committee table and that we are advisory to the board. And therefore we have a duty to keep the content under, apologize for that, the content within the committee table. And the second is due to the help of the communications committee and David Ellis, we came up with a script, so to speak, which is the committee protocol, which is something that can be used to remind people of their duty for confidentiality and what the intent of the committee and the dialogue is as we maintain very open discussion of issues, and people can feel free to express themselves in a manner not thinking that someone's going to leave the committee and post it on social media. So these are documents, these really go together hand in hand, that I would recommend to the board for adoption.
Okay, so we have a confidential acknowledgement and a committee protocol, and those are resolutions 12. E and G.
B.
B.
No, E
E and G. I'm sorry, E and G.
Edward George, yeah.
Are there any questions about these? Okay, then I'm going to move for adoption of E and G, 12E and 12G, for approval of the adoption of the confidentiality acknowledgement statement, approval of the committee protocol, and now we have the committee guideline. All in favor of those three? Any opposed? Great. Jim, again, thank you for those. We have
Yeah.
one other, you
Yeah.
have one other item, 12H.
Right. The last item is that the committee has been studying how do we advance ourselves to a modern age and use more electronic voting as a tool. And there's two components to this question. One is the ability, which we have through bylaws and other mechanisms, to advance Board of Elections and potentially even annual proxy to electronic format, following an appropriate communication strategy. And the second is how can we move towards having our referendums be able to be done on electronic. And we're not ready yet to advance that discussion about referendum electronic voting, but we are suggesting that the board following, we authorize management to complete, and they've done yeoman's work already, in terms of looking at the issue of tools, privacy, firms that do this. And there's a lot of technology and a lot of expertise out there that can really advance us, save us money, and do other things. So we would be recommending that we begin electronic voting process. We charge management consistent with the resolution 12H.
That needs to be approved by the board. And secondly, is there anything in the covenants that would cause us a concern with respect to initiating this action?
Not at this point in time in our discussion with council around board elections. There we are doing additional study around the question of referendum, David.
Any other questions, Mr. Barth?
Yes, I just want some clarification here, Jim. Is the intent to be able to do this as early as the fall board election?
Yes, it is. Assuming management completes their work and we cycle back here for a second level action on electronic voting for board elections.
Okay, well, I certainly encourage that. And I know Amanda and Sam have done a lot of homework on this. So hopefully we'll be able to do this. We're able to do Zoom. I think we can figure out how to vote electronically.
Can I add a little color to your question, Mr. Borghese?
Please do, because I still have a concern.
Okay, so under the CSA was created in 1998. We're governed by the South Carolina Nonprofit Act. Our bylaws give us the ability to do electronic voting for certain things. This would be one of those that is not specifically precluded in our bylaws. And so to make a covenant change in 74 covenants would take a covenant change to allow for electronic voting, because the covenant itself under 74 says that it must be by mail-in voting. So the difference is because CSA was created in 88, and we are governed by where our bylaws say as it relates to how we govern ourselves, we have the ability to provide electronic voting for the board elections. But if we're going to submit a covenant change, that has to be done by mail voting until the covenant itself is changed to allow for electronic voting.
And that's Sam, is why the committee separated the actions let's start getting into the world of electronic voting, and let's do it where we're enabled to do it.
And I was pleased to learn from Amanda that we have over 90% of our property owners have given us their email addresses, which we would be able to use. But we would also have a process for those for whom we don't have email addresses, or those who prefer a paper ballot, to get a paper ballot. But given that would give us well over 5,000 or 5,500 property owners who could vote electronically, which is the modern way to do it. And there is a high level of security and enforcement. I think the staff is doing a great job of investigating. We won't do anything until the board itself is comfortable that this will work, but I think we're on the right track. And I do think that the community wants it.
If you look at the resolution, that's exactly what we're doing. We're taking it in a step process. that, okay, now we're at the point where we think we can do this. We want to charge management with the detail, make sure we get questions out of the board, and then come back for the second level approval.
Well, I'm just questioning whether or not the way it's worded, if that's right at this particular point in time by saying we're approving it, period.
No, what this says is that we're approving the continued research today. The final board approval to be sought.
That's not what I'm reading here. Do I have the wrong?
You may have the wrong one.
That's it. Sorry, got an earlier version. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, I will move for a second for resolution 12H. Mr. Thompson, all in favor, raise your hand. That resolution passes. I want to thank the board for the very informative and helpful committee reports. Moving on to unfinished business. The only unfinished business that I'd like to remind our community, and Amanda mentioned it, we have the ability of those who are interested to apply to our nominations committee to seek election to next year's board. There are 3 seats available, and it is open to any resident. Our nominating committee will
Any property owner.
I'm sorry, any property owner. Thank you. Our nominating committee will vet those to determine their interest and their capabilities, and will nominate a slate, hopefully of as many as 6 potential applicants. I know I read Facebook often, and we're accused of being a whole bunch of old white guys. Sorry, Carolyn. But on the elected side, we are a bunch of old white guys who are residents and don't know anything about what's really going on in the world. We lack diversity. We lack the diversity of non-residents. We lack a lot of things. That's not the point in terms of no insult taken. We're all thick-skinned electors. But in order to be a director, you have to be willing to run. And you have to be willing to sit here and take some of that criticism, but you also have to put in the time and the effort. Being a director isn't just coming to these meetings once a month and sitting in Zoom. It's committee work. It's regularly analyzing things. It's sitting through board workshops. It's being involved. If you are interested in being involved in the community and having the opportunity to make decisions that we make in what we determine to be the public interest, in trying to find out what that is and talking to your neighbors and hearing what they're thinking, this is your opportunity to apply to be nominated. And I encourage those who are interested in helping the community move forward to seek nomination. You have to run for election to be a board member. And I encourage you to do so. I think Amanda announced the nominations applications will be closed on August 1st. Sandra, is that correct?
August 1st.
On August 1st. So you have some time, but I do encourage those who are interested in seeing what the community needs to be in the future. This is your way of being involved. Run for election. With that, there's no other unfinished business on my agenda. Anyone have any additional business to bring to the board? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Mr. Borghese, is there a second? Mr. Caskey, all in favor of adjourning, raise your hands. Our meeting is adjourned. I'm going to turn immediately without break, since I want to stay somewhat on task, to the questions that we've received. We've received a few from a few folks. First, from Paul Kirschfield. What is the status of the old building next to the Welcome Center? Are there any plans for this site? If not, consideration for raising the building. It is an eyesore and not a welcome site to visitors. Sam, you're the one who can best answer that, and I know you have a good answer, so I'll turn to you.
The best answer I can give you, Mr. Chairman, is we have engaged the town of Hilton Head. The new leadership of Hilton Head were on site last week with the new town manager, and we have made a proposal to the town to remedy the condition on that site, and we will be working with the town to get that done. So I'm very encouraged by the response from the new town manager, excuse me, and look forward to working with him and the town of Hilton Head on a number of issues that face Sea Pines along the Greenwood corridor from the circle all the way through the gate, the gallery of shops just being one of those.
Thank you, Sam. Next question comes from Paul Puma. As a full-time resident of Sea Pines, how do we once and for all prevent visitors from not following the rules by stopping their vehicles along Sea Pines Drive and South Beach Lane to unload beach equipment and people at a beach path? Well, there's a couple of things that we need to keep in mind. First of all, those beach pads are all available to anyone who is residing in Sea Pines. And so to the extent that people are using those beach pads and they are residing in Sea Pines at the time they're using them, that there's no reason we would stop them. They are doing nothing wrong. In terms of stopping along South Sea Pines Drive or North Sea Pines Drive for that matter, along any of those beach paths, that is obviously a traffic issue and it is a safety issue. And to the extent that we have officers who see that, they will ask the people to move along and they will ask them not to do so. Unfortunately, as I've said many times, and as you've heard from Sam and I, we have a limited amount of security staff available. And we do what we can. They certainly ride up and down the Sea Pines Drive on a regular basis, but you can't catch everyone any more than the state police can catch everyone who's going 85 to 90 miles an hour on 95. We are doing the best we can. But please remember that people who are using those beach paths, who are residing in Sea Pines at the time, are not doing anything unlawful. So the best I can tell you is as we can increase our security force, that's certainly an area during the summer that we will work on, and I'm sure we'll do the best we can there.
And if someone sees an issue with day trippers being dropped off there or other folks creating a traffic issue or a safety issue, please call Sea Pines Security and they'll get out there as quickly as possible.
And again, thank you, Mr. Kuma, for that question. The next is a few questions from Mr. Bob Quinn. The first is, why does the CSA board always think they know best and they can only decide what is best for us and then tell us? This includes the establishment of several task forces to decide in secret. Mr. Quinn, as I just noted, the Sea Pines, at least the 9 RPO members, are elected by the community to work hard, to study the issues, to spend time in committees dealing with other members of the public who are not board members, to speak to their various constituent friends and neighbors, to determine what the community's interests are, and to deal with issues as they come up. That's what we were elected to do. There's no doubt that there are other members of the community who are also qualified to do so, but they either haven't run or have run and not been elected. So the reason we think we always know best is because we've taken the time to study the issue and we've decided to commit ourselves to the time necessary to do so. If you think, and I'm sure there are others who think they can do better, that's the nature of representative government. I urge them to run for the board and see if they can get the community to make the decision that those are the people that will determine what's best for the community. And as far as a task force working in secret or committees working in secret, there is a point at which decisions have to be made, and every decision can be made by a plebiscite, a referendum. It's hard enough to get a referendum to get assessments done. So it's really not possible to have every decision we make open and subject to every person who wants to comment. We do have committees that have members of the public. I'm sure many of us read Facebook to get a sense of what the issues are that are of interest to the community. We take questions. But in terms of everything being done, it's not in secret per se. It's an efficient way to discuss the issues based on the information we have from the public. Next question he has is, based on the attachment to the court filing dealing with the validity of referendum on our infrastructure needs, they were based on an old study by an engineering firm that dealt almost exclusively with deferred maintenance. It did not deal with the potential increase in sea level. Is that something, will any new plan include efforts to contain stormwater in marshes? And if inadequate, to direct water to open spaces, including but not limited golf courses, lagoons, and other bodies of water further inland? So this is Mr. Quinn's concern about rising sea level. Sam, do you want to discuss that future?
Happy to say that we have a very engaged and thoughtful engineering firm, Cranston Engineering, who is representing CSA in matters of drainage and the stormwater improvements. They gave a full presentation last week to the MEMP committee about their work and their priorities. And I feel certain that they will continue to do that and update whatever the 2015 drainage study was. They've already begun work and updated that study, and they will take certainly sea level rise and issues into concern as it relates to road rebuilds, drainage, and all the above. So the answer is yes, certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn, for that question. His next question is, traffic and parking have obviously become major issues. If a street cannot accommodate parking, it is in effect equivalent to a common driveway. We do not maintain interior roads for our 2,000 villa owners as they are considered equivalent to driveways. Then why should we be maintaining roads that we cannot use? Well, the answer is relatively simple. CSA owns roads, some of which are in fact are very lengthy and have a number of homes, the T streets and other side streets, but we own those roads and that's why we maintain them. We do not own certain roads in the community, and we do not own private driveways owned by villas, and that's why we don't maintain them. So to the extent that we are the owner of what you would consider, someone would consider a driveway, we have to maintain it. If we are not the owner of what some would consider a driveway, we don't maintain it. That's the private community. Finally, traffic has been a concern of mine even before I was on the gate committee. They are handing that, I'm trying to get down to where his question is. They are adding a 6-lane bridge to handle anticipated increase from 45,000 to 65,000 on there, but doing nothing about the 2015 count of 38,000 vehicles a day on Pope Avenue with 3,000 to 4,000 passing through the circle. Please explain why we didn't have he believes we didn't have a seat at the table during the planning by the town on that gate traffic issue. Sam, perhaps you can explain how we now have a seat at the table.
I can't speak to the past, but I'm very confident that the town council, as well as the current administration with new town manager, are going to be very engaged in the Sea Pine Circle traffic issues, particularly as it relates to all issues of traffic on the south end that will be affecting Sea Pines, including the Palmetto Bay toll booths going down and that becoming free flow traffic. So again, can't speak to the past, but moving ahead, I'm very confident that the Sea Pines community will be represented in dealings with the town, the county, and SCDOT.
And I want to make special mention of the fact that when we hired Sam, among the many things that impressed us, besides his Southern accent, was the fact that he had been actively involved in a number of municipalities and had a lot of town government experience. And I can tell you that while he's been here in the last, certainly the last 9 months to a year, he's had numerous and regular meetings with the town and the county and various elements of the town and county to make sure that Sea Pines is recognized for the importance it is to both the town and the county. And so he's developed an incredibly good relationship, and I am confident that those relationships will work to the benefit of Sea Pines as we move forward with some of the traffic issues in the Greenwood corridor.
And the town has asked for our input.
Yeah.
So that is why Sam is more engaged than we have been in past.
And we've given it to them very recently.
Lastly, questions come from Ms. Terry Weiss. She would like the names of all current board members of the CARB, ARB, and ARC. Terry, off the top of my head, I don't have them, but I'll be happy to send those names to you. You're asking whether the funds of the CARB, which is commercial ARB, the ARB, and the ARC are rolled into CSA, or if they're retained in separate accounts. They are not rolled into CSA, they are separate accounts. And then she asked for the balances, the addresses of who to require inquiry regarding the books and records of ARB. Members of the property owners in CSA are not members of the ARC, and they are not members of the ARB, and therefore they are not necessarily entitled to any of those information. And we've retained counsel to confirm that. And so we will be happy to give you any property owner that information to which they are entitled. And otherwise, those are private corporations or private nonprofit corporations, and their records are not necessarily available to members of the public.
And Larry,
I'm sorry, I'm told they are for-profit.
Larry, question.
Yes.
And aren't those organizations all under separate covenants and their own organizational papers? And
yes, they are. Yes, they are. And as I say, they are not CSA oriented, and they are members, property owners as members of CSA, are not members of these corporations, and therefore the information that's available is not necessarily the same. Those are all the questions that I have. I want to thank those members of the public who stayed with us and have watched any part of the meeting. I hope those who watch it on video will gain information from it. I appreciate the time and effort that each of you puts into being a board member, and particularly that time you spent with us today. So with that, we're done. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.